If someone could just pop over in the chat and let me know that you can hear me, that would be great. Just had some technical difficulties, of course, just as I was getting started. And it's always so much fun. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming here tonight. It is Wednesday, the 25th of March, and I can hardly believe that it's Wednesday and that it's the end of March. Lately, time seems to have taken on this whole new dimension for me. And what used to feel like a month feels like a day, or vice versa. It's just so many things are happening so quickly that it's interesting times for sure. So I want to thank you for coming. I have a couple of polls that I posted along the side. So as you can see that there is some chat up there, and some people are in there saying hi. So thank you. If you have any questions or anything as we go, feel free to post in there and I'll have a look. And yeah, I have a couple of polls posted. If you get a chance to pop in there, I'm just asking to know how overwhelm shows up in your life. It shows up in our lives in many different ways. And that is sometimes what causes us more overwhelm, is because we don't know we're in overwhelm and we just keep getting deeper and deeper in that overwhelm. And I also wanted to know just generally how you guys are doing, how everyone is getting through such big changes in our lives. And I put a scale from 1 to 7. I don't like 10. Like to make it different, and just wanted to know somewhere between barely hanging on and loving and thriving in change and challenge. Some people are all about loving the change and embracing the challenge. And that's kind of why we're here today, to understand a little bit more about ourselves and about what's happening to us when we get in overwhelm. I am giving you part of a presentation that I had hoped to give. I do workshops and I speak from the stage, and that has changed dramatically, but I wanted to come on and give some little snips of information that I would normally do in a workshop. And I was hoping to just keep plugging along here Wednesdays at 6:30, talking about overwhelm, talking about how to recognize it in our lives, what causes it, and not externally what causes it, but internally kind of what's happening with us. And I want to talk about some strategies of really understanding ourselves and what stops us from really stepping into our lives and being our true selves. I am a career renovation specialist and confidence coach. And I really help focus people on finding who they are on the inside and how to show that in how they live and what they do. I feel it's a huge disconnection when we can't be our authentic selves. And so I help people through coaching, through speaking, through workshops and seminars, now webinars. Just talking about overwhelm. We don't talk about it enough. We don't recognize it enough often. And I think the more we talk about it, then the easier it is to recognize and the easier it is to slip out of overwhelm. What I'll do is I'll make sure I leave a little bit of time at the end of today's talk just for more Q&A if anything comes up. I'll address questions, then I'll try to address them as we go if anything comes up. It's just me. I have no producer, no facilitator, so I might not see all of the questions that come up, but I will get to them, I promise. And yeah, so here we go. all about technology, and and I love it. Maybe. So let's just, it seems that just as we started, my computer crashed. So I am so sorry. I'm going to just pull out my document here and we'll get started. I see that some people have answered the poll and some people are in chit-chatting. So if I would like to know, while I'm pulling this up, if you could put in where you're from, I would love to know. I would love to know that. Oh, beautiful. From Germany. Fantastic. Allie, hi. Thank you so much. So glad. So here we go. This is something I'm only doing on Crowdcast. I don't do any kind of Facebook Lives or anything like that. I enjoy this platform a lot more. And if you follow From Curiosity to Courage, you'll be able to see all my new fun, interesting things that I have coming here. What I would like to do, actually, first of all, is just start with a little bit of grounding. I start all of my coaching sessions this way, and I am now starting to do all of my meetings that I host or facilitate this way. I just feel like it's such a great way to be able to put everything else that's on hold around us to really focus your time and attention on what's going on. Sitting down at home working on the computer can really pull our attention away because we have so many distractions now, and it's really quite easy to not fully be in the moment. So I don't want to waste your time. I want you to get the most out of this. So I am just going to go through a little grounding exercise for everyone. So that'd be fantastic. So if you wouldn't mind, if you can, put your feet flat on the floor. And I'd like you to just, you don't have to close your eyes for this, but if you could just look softly, maybe soften your gaze, kind of look down your nose. And we're going to start with some really deep breathing. And I'd like you on the inhale to just imagine that your lungs are this big box. So when you inhale, you're going to expand your ribs out to the front and to the back and then to the sides as well. And just imagine that box filling up with some nice deep breaths. And I'd like you to bring your attention to the air as it comes in through your nose and just feel that on the top of your lip, on your nose, that fresh air. And as you feel that air come in your nose, I'd also like you to feel the tiny little muscles in your face. So those muscles that are around your lips, and just relax them. And the muscles in your cheeks, the tiny little muscles around your eyes, and the muscles around your forehead. Just take a couple of more deep breaths. And on every inhale, just relax your face even more than it's already relaxed. So great. So one more big giant inhale, and then we'll get started. Normally, when I talk about overwhelm, I talk about making a plan on understanding overwhelm and how to recognize it and how to navigate your way out of it. There's a cycle of overwhelm that has three main components, and I'll touch briefly on that tonight. But what I want to start to focus on is getting focus on how to navigate out of that overwhelm. Another part of the overwhelm cycle that I like to talk about is really about reduction and prevention. And we actually did an exercise that reduces overwhelm and actually can prevent overwhelm. And we started our meeting that way. We started our conversation that way with some quick visualization, some really quick deep breathing, and a little bit of meditation can fit into your day anytime, any place. A few deep breaths and recognizing that it's just a moment to shut the world out is really part of not only preventing overwhelm, but helping you reduce that feeling of overwhelm in your body. But that's why I talk about overwhelm and talking about making a plan around those strategies. When I talk about overwhelm, this is what I'm talking about: is when you're temporarily unable to think clearly due to emotional feelings making you experience too much distraction. And that's what I'm talking about getting focus. Overwhelm has this biological ability to actually fog our thinking and to allow us to be distracted. It's part of how we're built. It's part of being human. When we become overwhelmed, blood rushes out of our heads into our extremities as we think we're under stress. We want to fight, flight, or freeze. It also drains our energy, drains out of our brains into our muscles, so that we're able to run and we're able to fight off whatever that overwhelm or whatever that stressor is. Now, biologically, we're designed that way, and that really served us well when we were running from tigers and bears. But it doesn't always serve us in the best way when, if we could only become focused, we could get what we needed done, and then the overwhelm would go away. This definition I just want to say that I found it by a woman called Stacey Winter. And I really like the idea that overwhelm is temporary, and remembering that energy, that feeling, that fogginess that we feel is a temporary state. We're not always going to feel that way. We have the ability within ourselves to get out of overwhelm whenever we want. Overwhelm is not about what's happening to us on the external. It's not about the things that are going on in the world. It's not about world events. It's not about people in our lives. Overwhelm is how we feel about how we're spending our time and the things that we spend our time on. Overwhelm is the thoughts we have about those things that we feel that we can't manage. And it is energy that is created by our thoughts. That's really the key here, is understanding that. When we get stuck in this cycle of overwhelm with a very anxious mind, we get caught up in actually predicting the future and telling ourselves stories that just aren't true. And the longer we're in the state of overwhelm, the easier it is for our bodies to create this standard, this habit of becoming almost predicting the future. And when we are in this habit and we repeat it enough times, it starts to stick. So we get into this cycle of overwhelm a lot quicker the more often we're there. And we stay there longer. It's it's just like any other habit. It's just like the habit of coffee in the morning. It's the habit of brushing your teeth without thinking. It's the habit of smoking without the nicotine. I don't know if anyone's still smokers, but it's that habit. It's the same premise. It's the same idea that happens. And once we're in this habit, like I said, it gets really hard to get out. So I talked about this cycle of overwhelm and kind of what happens. And these are really the 3 steps I see to overcoming overwhelm, is to discover the entry point and what's happening. It's also to discover your fear pattern. And I'll touch a little bit on this tonight, but we won't have too much time to go into the fear pattern, but I will talk about it in coming weeks. And then also, it might sound simple, but isn't always, and that's getting out of overwhelm is actually doing the opposite that we have trained our brains to do, doing the opposite of what our habit is. Oftentimes, it is a lot easier to build in a new habit than it is to break an old habit. We replace and almost need to exercise our neurons so that they form a new habit, form a new pathway for that energy. Breaking it is really hard. Forming a new habit is a lot easier, and then our energy has a different path to flow. So this is the cycle of overwhelm that I'm talking about. And these are the 3 things that happen. We have a cue or a trigger that puts us into overwhelm. Then we have thoughts about the triggers, thoughts about the event, thoughts about a feeling. Sometimes we even have thoughts about a thought. And then we have a reaction to it. And that reaction can then cause either another trigger or feed into that cycle of overwhelm, that we slip into that habit time and time again. And these are the things that can help us get out of the overwhelm. And it's really understanding what happens right before the trigger. If we can understand what the trigger is, then we can understand what happens right before the trigger. And that's the awareness of the overwhelm in your body and what's causing your overwhelm. Then we look at thoughts, and those thoughts are the habits and the patterns that we get into. These are the fear patterns that I talk about. Fear shows up in our lives pretty much in 4 different ways. And although it shows up in all of us, we have a tendency to have a dominant fear pattern. And those things are perfectionism. Another fear pattern is sabotage. Also, people pleasing and pessimism. And I believe, and this is what I coach and this is what I teach, is understanding these fear patterns and how they show up in your life is key, again, to breaking the habit. The reaction is what you are choosing to do. The reaction is making a conscious choice to understand that what you're doing is a choice and that you can choose to do differently. So this is what I wanted to talk about tonight. And we'll carry on next week to talk more about fear patterns. But I want to talk about that ability to feel overwhelmed and then to break into that cycle so that you are recognizing when you're in overwhelm. Sometimes we can recognize when we're in overwhelm and get out of it just like that, with a little practice, with being present, with some practice about being mindful and tuning into what our bodies are doing. Oftentimes we can control overwhelm like in a split second once we recognize it. Those other parts are helping us to build that ability. Recognizing our fear patterns and choosing to do something differently is then just feeding into this ability and exercising this muscle that we can recognize our overwhelm. So I want to, I'm going to just stop sharing for a second and come back. and come back and say hi. Pardon me. What I'd like to do, sorry, I need to have a drink. What I would like to do right now is for you to just take a moment and just imagine the last time you were overwhelmed. And I'd like you to just take a couple of deep breaths like we did earlier, feeling the air come in at your nose. And I really would like you to try to focus on the energy of overwhelm and where it sits in your body. And with a few deep breaths and just thinking about the last time you were really overwhelmed, I want you to just feel the overwhelm in your body. I want you to just, in your mind, describe where it is. If you can, touch it, wherever that overwhelm is. This is where mine lives, right in my throat. And I just want you to think about the color of your overwhelm. I want you to think about if it has a temperature. Is it hot or cold? Does it have a shape? And when you're feeling that overwhelm, when you have a really clear understanding of what it looks like or what it feels like, maybe even what it sounds like, if it has a sound, I'd like you to take a couple of deep breaths and breathe right into that space, right into that energy. And what I'd like you to do is just expand it. With the air that you breathe, I want you to change the shape of it. And with the next inhale, I want you to change the temperature of it. And on the next inhale, I'd like you to move it to a different part of your body. Now I'd like you to check back into your body, and I'd like you to make note. Does it feel different? What can happen is that just by focusing on that energy for a moment, that energy of overwhelm, that feeling of overwhelm, and changing it, it allows us to actually break that habit. It allows us to be completely present for a moment. When you were doing that exercise for a minute and a half, you were nowhere else but in your body. You were thinking about what was going on in your body, you were breathing, and you were shutting out the rest of the world. And that's practicing presence and practicing mindfulness. And with that ability to tune into our bodies, when we start to recognize when we're actually starting to be in overwhelm, what happens is that we get to a point where we are completely overwhelmed and that energy just surges through our bodies and we're losing our minds. We are losing focus. We've already been distracted a million times. We're not doing what we need to do. I became completely overwhelmed today in the grocery store, and I felt this, I didn't realize, but I felt this buildup through the morning thinking about going grocery shopping. And I felt this buildup of where it sits in me. And I felt it, and I didn't recognize it until I was actually in the grocery store. Through practice and understanding what overwhelm feels like in my body, some meditation this morning, I would have recognized that I was feeling a little bit anxious about going grocery shopping today. And by recognizing when I'm feeling a little bit anxious or a little bit overwhelmed, I'm then able to take some presence and really just understand that the task ahead of me is going to require my attention so that I can get through it without losing my mind or without becoming completely overwhelmed. And understanding that, like when I was at the grocery store, I was able to quickly do some deep breathing to really I just touched my throat. I just really said, okay, right, thank you. I show gratitude. I said, thank you. I appreciate you're trying to protect me from a perceived or real danger. It's hard to say. But thank you for making me not want to go grocery shopping. I really do appreciate that you were trying to protect me. However, I did need food. So that is why I needed to go. And it did. And it went away quite quickly. And I was able to actually enjoy the rest of my grocery shopping. I was able to enjoy the people that were there. We were able to laugh and have a good time and to actually connect. And I was able to participate in a moment that would have been lost to me had I stayed in that overwhelm. That moment would have really not even existed. So practicing presence, practicing mindfulness, and practicing just tuning into your body, knowing what overwhelm feels like. Our thoughts and our energy is the only thing we have control over. And by focusing on that and not focusing on what we don't have control over in the rest of the world, we can start to build our resilience and we start to understand how to overcome overwhelm and get our focus back. So I know I promised 5 minutes, but now we just have a couple of minutes before 7 o'clock. And I really wanted to thank you for coming on here today. If you have any questions, just throw them in the chat. And again, just go on over and pop in your votes to the polls. I love it. We have a couple of answers here about shutting down and vegging out when you're overwhelmed. Very common to do that when we don't know how to get control over what's going on. We often shut down. Understanding that we're always in choice and we actually always do have control over how we feel and what we think is the first step to understanding how to get reconnected with ourselves, reconnect with that light, with that energy, with our values, into stepping into the world in a way that we want to. We did get a couple of votes too, being online and researching all the best ways. I'm guilty of that. And it's also a way of tuning out, understanding that you don't know what the best way is, that you think you don't have the answer inside. You look for the answer outside. But like I said, at the end of the day, we are in control of the energy that flows through our bodies. And those are the feelings. That's what I'm talking about, right? When I say energy, it's the chemical energy that goes through our bodies when we have an emotion. The serotonin, the dopamine, the happy chemicals, all that, we create those. That's energy. It's currency that flows through our bodies. So I wanted to thank you all for coming out tonight. And if you have any more questions for me, you can use the find out more button that's below and go on to my website. So you can contact me through there. You can also just, you know what, I'll just throw my email address here in the chat and reach out, say hi, say whatever you need to say. And I hope to see you back here next Wednesday. And like I said, follow me on Crowdcast from Curiosity to Courage. You can also find me. I'm the most active on LinkedIn, a little bit active on Instagram. But LinkedIn is where I live for social media. I post all kinds of great stuff on my LinkedIn profile there. So if you are interested in knowing more about me and what I do, you can check me out. But I hope to check you out next week, next Wednesday, 6:30 for a half hour. And we'll start talking about I think we'll start talking about some fear patterns and really understanding how fear shows up in our lives. So that's what we'll do. So take care. And this is my virtual hug these days. So I do wish you all the best. Thanks again.